I've been here before.
Now lying in decay.
But there's something wrong with here.
I met a traveler from an antique land who said,
Wait, you can speak here? Billions of years after the universe met its demise, you awaken in a realm where death reigns supreme, but even death may die. You play as the physical embodiment of consciousness and travel this world full of plague and death to reach your final goal and restore life again. Necrophosis is a walking sim. Yes, I know, we're all kinda tired of those, but listen up. This is not your boring walk here and hear mommy cry and then run the other way for safety. There is something very special here, and if you want to hear all my thoughts, stay for the whole review. So Necrophosis draws inspiration from a lot of places, the likes of Beksinski, H.R. Geiger, and some Salvador Dali to create its visual medium and mythology, while also mixing H.P. Lovecraft in there a little bit. The result is an experience that I've never encountered before in any medium, maybe besides a museum. The game looks absolutely stunning, and I read another review online where it said that a game like this could never have been made 10 years ago, and it's true. The leaps in technology and graphical fidelity have allowed this world to come forth without any compromises to the artist's vision. The world is thus a mix between all the influences that I mentioned, creating a surreal plane of existence where everything is decayed and corrupted, but yet somehow still alive. It's made to be looked at and explored, and all its walls and environments tell a story of a place lost to time. It's unavoidable though to draw comparisons to Scorn, the game that I mentioned previously, released a few years ago with the same influences and vibe, you could say. But that is where comparisons end. Necrophosis distinguishes itself by being a much more thought-provoking game, rather than a full-blown action horror game. Here the real meaning and value is in the voyage you partake in, and even though you can still of course die in different ways, the threat isn't the immediate creatures that stalk you, rather the decision and the finality of your trip in this world. This leads me to talk a little bit more in depth about the graphics and visuals.
Let me play right with them. I think the melodies are grand.
Like I said, every environment and set piece are carefully designed, and the level of artistry on display is no short of incredible. And I still need to stress that this was developed by only 2 people with enormous talent. It's so moving to see such a small team and such a small budget to be able to fully develop their own creative vision and create such a different and uncompromised experience, and not being burdened with corporate meddling and hungry investors that force projects to compromise their artistic values in search of a larger audience. This is really its own thing, and they're trying to create a new mythology and new story, and I really need to stress that the team did such an amazing job in this category. Along with the amazing soundscape and soundtrack, the whole thing just swallows you whole into its mystic world and immerses you in an experience beyond your nightmares. But visuals are only the surface here, and there's much more to find if you look closer. Necrophosis tries to ease the player into its story. It's not really explained directly to you what's going on. Instead, the game employs a much more unusual approach, using poetry and lost documents littered throughout the world for the player to find and further clue into what's going on. You essentially play as the late embodiment of consciousness. What does this mean? Well, I won't explain you, otherwise I would spoil the game. But what I can tell you is that you are tasked to walk through a treacherous path of death and decay to reach your goal, while on the way understanding more and more what has happened to this world. And while I could dive deeper into the game's concepts and symbolisms, I think that this is one of the most interesting aspects of the game, and I want to leave you with a chance of experiencing it for yourself without being tainted with more spoilers. Although I do think that it's well executed, it does have a sense of large scale to it, so there are elements that end up being left aside and not very well explained to the player. The whole cosmic fantasy that creeped out of nowhere kinda left me a bit confused there and didn't seem to meet the theme and story of the world. Also, due to the nature of this story, the main character isn't your typical relatable fare, and I suspect that some people may have a gripe with this particular thing. But here it works because the conflict comes always from an external place. All in all, I very much enjoyed the story of Necrophosis, trying to uncover its forgotten past while meeting strange and uncanny characters. It's trying to tell a different tale that you don't see every day in the gaming medium, and while it might not be for everyone, it is certainly something that gothic horror fans will definitely enjoy. Now, let's talk a little bit about the actual playing side of the game. On the gameplay side, there isn't really much to talk about. Necrophosis is a simple game with very simple mechanics and puzzles. You can definitely call it a walking sim, but I prefer it more as an interactive experience. You are still tasked to solve little puzzles, nothing very intricate, but I do think that the experience, visuals and story here are the fundamental keys to enjoying this game. And it's not trying to play like an FPS, rather it's just taking you on a journey and letting you drive and steer the wheel. It took me 2 hours and a half to finish the game, and I took my sweet time looking around, exploring, finding documents, analyzing the backgrounds, getting some achievements, and also analyzing in close detail the myriad of characters. There were a few janky things along the way, like it is to be expected from an indie game, nothing too serious though. Key bindings didn't save, so the next time I would open the game, they would be reverted back to default. I also experienced some frame drops when entering or loading a new area, but nothing that really hardened my enjoyment. Fortunately, there's an FOV slider available in the options menu, so if you enjoy playing with a wider field of view, the devs implemented the option to be able to customize it. There was also an option to disable the crosshairs, and this ended up making my experience that much more atmospheric, but I still kept the interact icon on so I wouldn't miss any items along the way. I recommend you doing the same, so you can immerse yourself even more in the game, because there is no shooting or aiming here, so it ends up being a cumbersome element, distracting you from the immersion and from jumping into the world. The devs also implemented achievements, and not all of them are tied to the story, so there's always something else to look out for if you're an achievement hunter. All in all, Necrophosis is not your average game. It's filled with intricate poetry and symbolism that harkens back to old myths that can be found in different cultures and religions. It does not present its story in a very traditional format, even though there are documents to be found. They are not obvious and leave to the player to unravel the mysteries of creation that it explores. It's a meditative experience, although bleak and grim, that looks into what's beyond our religious beliefs of life after death, and ponders a lot of questions. It's extremely existential, and not an experience for a big crowd, but it's certainly very interesting for fans of a more psychological horror like me. And for the runtime of a movie, I do think that it's a great opportunity to sit back and be driven through this horrorscape. And just priced at €15 or $16, this is especially a recommendation for me. If you're a fan of psychological and more grim horror, and H.R. Geiger visuals, or even a little bit of Lovecraft, I'd recommend you getting this game and immersing yourself into this amazing indie horror.